What if a single simple act of kindness, one you've probably done 100 times, could shatter your reality and rebuild it into the life you've only dreamed of? This isn't a fairy tale. This is the story of Maya, a struggling waitress drowning in debt, and Julian Croft, a man who had everything and nothing at all. She offered him a glass of water when he hadn't asked for one. She saw a flicker of pain in his eyes that everyone else ignored. What happened the next day wasn't just a reward. It was a reckoning that would expose secrets, test loyalties, and prove that the smallest gesture can unleash the most powerful storm. Stay with us. The Tuesday night shift at Aria, one of Boston's more self-important fine dining establishments, was a special kind of purgatory. It was quiet enough for the staff to be on edge, but busy enough that you couldn't relax. For Maya Lin, it was a tightrope walk she performed 5 nights a week. Each step was measured. Each smile calibrated, each trip to the kitchen, a frantic dash to stay ahead of the crushing weight of her life. At 24, Maya wore the restaurant's starched black uniform like a suit of armor, but beneath it, she was fraying at the seams. Her share of the rent for a cramped Alston apartment was 3 weeks overdue. The bill for her younger sister Lily's specialized asthma medication sat on her nightstand, its bold red final notice, a nightly spectre. Lily's coughs seemed to echo in Maya's ears even when she was miles away, a constant rattling reminder of her own inadequacy. Her dream, the one she nurtured in the stolen hours between 3 a.m. and sunrise, was to paint. Her corner of the apartment was a chaotic sanctuary of canvases, the air thick with the scent of turpentine and linseed oil. She painted with a desperate, hungry passion, capturing the fleeting expressions of strangers on the T, the weary slant of light on brick buildings, the ghost of a smile on Lily's sleeping face. But paint and canvas cost money, and money was a currency she dealt in, but never seemed to possess. Table 7 needs a re-clean Lin. "I can see a smudge from here," barked Mr. Henderson, the restaurant's manager. He was a man whose sense of authority was inversely proportional to his height. He prowled the dining room floor like a miniature hawk, his eyes missing no detail that could be used for a reprimand. "Yes, Mr. Henderson," Maya said, her voice a practiced, neutral tone. She had learned long ago that any hint of personality was a demerit in his book. She meticulously polished the already gleaming mahogany table, her reflection a distorted, weary stranger. The clinking of glasses, the low hum of conversations about stock options and summering in the Hamptons, it was all a world away. She was a ghost in this machine. Her only purpose to be an invisible facilitator of other people's comfort. It was just after 9 p.m. when he walked in. The city was slick with a persistent drizzle, and most late arrivals were hurried, flustered, shaking off umbrellas. This man was different. He moved with an unnerving stillness, as if the world outside didn't apply to him. He was tall and lean, dressed in a charcoal grey suit that was so perfectly tailored it seemed less like clothing and more like a second skin. It wasn't flashy. It was simply devastatingly expensive. His hair was dark, flecked with silver at the temples, and his face was a study in controlled sorrow. He looked to be in his late 40s, with eyes that seemed to hold the weight of a long, painful history. He didn't wait for the hostess. He scanned the room, his gaze sweeping past the chattering couples and boisterous business groups, and settled on an empty two-top in the darkest corner of the room. He moved toward it and sat down without a word. Carla, another waitress who thrived on gossip, sidled up to Maya at the service station. "Get a load of Mr. Darcy in the corner. $10. Says he just closed $1 billion deal or his wife just left him. It's not my section. Maya murmured, her eyes still on the man. It wasn't his wealth that struck her, but his profound solitude. It was a tangible thing, a cold aura that seemed to push the ambient warmth of the restaurant away. His assigned waiter, a new hire named Ben, approached the table nervously. "Good evening, sir. Can I get you started with something from the bar?" The man didn't look at the menu. He didn't even look at Ben. He stared at the single unlit candle on his table. "No. Nothing." His voice was low, raspy, as if it hadn't been used in a long time. Ben faltered. Right. "Water, then. Still or sparkling?" "I don't want anything." The finality in his tone was a dismissal. Ben retreated, flustered, and reported to Henderson, who immediately began fuming. "Unacceptable. He's taking up a prime table. If he's not ordering, he needs to leave. Give him 5 minutes." Maya watched the exchange. She saw Henderson's petty indignation, Ben's youthful panic, and the man's unyielding stillness. But she saw something else, too. A tremor in his hand as it rested on the table. A tightness around his jaw. The almost imperceptible way his gaze was fixed on the empty chair opposite him. This wasn't arrogance. It was grief. It was a look she knew. She'd seen it in her own mother's eyes after her father left. She saw it in her own reflection after a particularly bad phone call from Lily's doctor. It was the look of someone trying to hold the shattered pieces of their world together with sheer force of will. On impulse, she did something she wasn't supposed to do. It was against Henderson's cardinal rule: never engage unless engaged. She filled a heavy crystal tumbler with iced water, added a slice of lemon, and placed it on her tray. "What are you doing?" "That's not your table," Carla hissed. Maya ignored her. She walked over to the corner table, her heart thumping a nervous rhythm against her ribs. She didn't approach from the front, but from the side, careful not to break his line of sight to the empty chair. She placed the glass of water on the table quietly and deliberately. He didn't flinch, but his eyes flickered towards the glass. "Sometimes you don't know you're thirsty until someone offers you a drink," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "No charge." She didn't wait for a response. She turned and walked away, feeling his gaze on her back. It wasn't an angry or annoyed look. It was one of quiet, startled surprise. She felt a hot flush of fear. Henderson had surely seen that. She braced for the inevitable tirade. But Henderson was busy fawning over a local politician at another table. The crisis was averted for now. For the next hour, the man sat there. He didn't touch his phone. He didn't read. He just sat the untouched glass of water, sweating onto the dark wood. Maya stole glances at him when she could. He seemed to be having a silent conversation with the empty chair, his expression shifting from deep sorrow to the ghost of a fond memory, and back again. Finally, just after 10, he stood. He placed a few bills on the table and walked out as quietly as he had entered. When Ben went to clear the table, he stopped short. "Whoa." Carla and Maya drifted over. On the table, tucked under the still full glass of water, were 5 crisp $100 bills. $500. For a glass of water he didn't even drink. Carla's jaw was slack. Who was that guy? Ben was ecstatic, but Maya wasn't looking at the money. She was looking at the glass. He had left it full exactly as she had placed it. It wasn't a payment for a drink. It was a message, a thank you for the gesture itself. That night, as she walked home in the rain, the $500, her share, after a brief argument with Ben and a glare from Henderson, felt heavy in her pocket. It was enough for the rent and Lily's medicine, a temporary dam against the flood. But it wasn't the money that occupied her thoughts. It was the man's profound sadness and the strange electric feeling of having pierced through it just for a moment with a simple glass of water. She fell asleep and dreamed of painting not with colors, but with shades of silence and sorrow trying to capture the face of the quiet, well-dressed stranger. She had no idea that the storm was no longer gathering. It had already broken. And when she woke up, its tidal wave was about to crash directly into her life. The next morning, Maya woke up with a feeling she hadn't experienced in months, a sliver of hope. It was fragile like a shard of glass, but it caught the morning light and felt warm. She paid her landlord online, the payment successful notification sending a wave of relief through her. She then called the 24-hour pharmacy and ordered a 3-month supply of Lily's medication, arranging to pick it up after her shift. For the first time in a long time, the knot of anxiety in her stomach had loosened just a little. As she sketched in her notebook on the bus to work, she found herself drawing the man from the night before. She couldn't get his face right. It wasn't about the features, the strong jaw, the sad eyes. It was about capturing the atmosphere around him, the invisible weight that seemed to bend the space he occupied. When she arrived at Aria for her 4 p.m. shift, the mood was bizarre. Instead of the usual pre-service bustle, the staff was gathered in a confused cluster by the main entrance, which was locked. Mr. Henderson was standing there, speaking into his phone in a tone that was an odd mix of sycophantic and frantic. "What's going on?" Maya asked Carla, who was reapplying her lipstick using her phone's camera. "No idea," Carla said, smacking her lips. "Henderson got a call an hour ago and started freaking out. Said the restaurant is closed tonight, a full buyout for a private event. He's trying to call in the A-team, you know, the servers he actually likes to work it." A full buyout on a Wednesday was practically unheard of. It meant someone had paid an astronomical sum to have the entire 200-seat restaurant to themselves. Speculation flew through the staff. "It's got to be the Red Sox owner," one of the cooks suggested. "No, I heard a movie is filming in town. It's for the lead actor, what's his name, Chris Powell." Another server chimed in. Mr. Henderson hung up the phone, a smug, self-satisfied smile plastered on his face. He clapped his hands together for attention. "All right, people, listen up. We have an extremely high-profile client tonight. A complete restaurant buyout. The client has requested absolute discretion. That means no social media, no blabbing to your friends." He scanned the group, his eyes lingering on the staff he deemed worthy. "Carla, David, you're with me. Marco, you'll be heading the kitchen. The rest of you enjoy the paid night off. The client is footing the bill for everyone's scheduled hours." A murmur of relief and excitement went through the dismissed staff. A paid night off was a gift. But Maya felt a prickle of unease. Henderson's gaze flickered to her, and his smile tightened into a sneer. "Lynn, a word." He pulled her aside, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "I saw your little stunt last night. Breaking protocol, approaching a guest outside your section. You think you're clever, don't you? You got lucky. That man was clearly unstable, and you happened to get a big tip out of it. Don't ever, ever do something like that again. Your job is to be a cog in this machine, not some feel-good charity worker. Is that understood?" "Yes, Mr. Henderson," she said, her cheeks burning with humiliation. The small warmth she had felt all day turned to ice. Good. Now go home. I don't want your brand of charity anywhere near this VIP. He scoffed. Maya turned away, the injustice stinging her eyes. She had done her job with more humanity than he could ever muster, and he was punishing her for it. She joined the group of departing staff, pulling her jacket tight around her as she stepped back out into the dreary Boston afternoon. The hope she had woken up with felt foolish now, a naive dream. It was just a job. She was just a cog. As she walked toward the bus stop, a sleek black town car, a Lincoln Continental, the kind mayors and CEOs used, pulled up to the curb in front of Aria. A woman in a sharp, dark pantsuit stepped out from the passenger side. She had a tablet in her hand and an air of no-nonsense efficiency. Henderson practically tripped over himself, rushing out to greet her. "Ma'am, welcome. I'm David Henderson, the general manager. Everything is being prepared to your specifications. My team is ready." The woman, whose name was Evelyn, gave him a cool, appraising look that seemed to take in his entire character and find it wanting. "Your team, I was under the impression this was a full staff buyout. The fee was quite specific on that point. All scheduled staff were to be compensated for their time and asked to be present." Henderson's smugness evaporated. "Ah, yes, of course. But for an event of this caliber. I took the liberty of selecting my most experienced personnel to ensure flawless service." Evelyn raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "You took the liberty." Mr. Croft's instructions were crystal clear. He wanted the restaurant exactly as it was last night. The same lighting, the same table arrangement, and the same staff on duty. He was very specific about that. At the mention of the name Croft, Maya, who had been lingering at the bus stop, froze. It couldn't be. Henderson was sweating now. Mr. Croft. The Julian Croft. Julian Croft wasn't just a rich man. He was a titan, a tech revolutionary who had co-founded Axiom Dynamics, a company that had reshaped the landscape of artificial intelligence. He was a recluse, notoriously private, especially after the tragic death of his wife 2 years prior. His face was rarely seen, but his name was synonymous with unimaginable wealth and power. The same Evelyn confirmed, her tone icy. "He is on his way. Now where is the rest of the staff you dismissed?" She looked past Henderson, and her eyes locked onto the group of servers and cooks huddled under the bus shelter. Her gaze scanned them, then stopped, locking directly onto Maya. "You," Evelyn said, her voice clear and carrying across the street. "You're Maya Lin." "Correct." Every head turned. Maya's heart leapt into her throat. She could only nod mute. Evelyn's severe expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Madam Croft has requested you specifically. In fact, you're the reason we're all here." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Carla's jaw dropped so far, her lipsticked mouth formed a perfect O. The other staff members stared, their faces a mixture of shock and envy. But the most stunning reaction was on the face of Mr. Henderson. The blood drained from his face, replaced by a pasty greenish pallor. He looked from the formidable Evelyn to the stunned Maya, and back again, the horrifying calculus of his mistake dawning on him in real time. Her Henderson stammered, pointing a trembling finger. "But she's just, Evelyn ignored him completely. She walked across the street, the traffic seeming to part for her, and stopped in front of Maya. "If you'll come with me, Miss Lin, Mr. Croft is waiting to speak with you." "Me?" Maya finally found her voice, though it was a reedy whisper. He'd prefer to explain that himself, Evelyn said gently. Please. In a daze, Maya allowed herself to be led back across the street, past her dumbfounded colleagues, and past the petrified Mr. Henderson. As she reached the door of the restaurant, Henderson seemed to snap out of his stupor. Panic, raw and ugly, twisted his features. "Wait!" he yelped, rushing forward. "There's been a misunderstanding. Ms. Lin is one of my finest employees." A real asset? I was just testing her. Yes, a loyalty test. Evelyn stopped and turned, fixing him with a look of such profound contempt that he physically recoiled. "Mr. Henderson," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. "You just failed a test of your own." She then turned to Maya and gestured toward the door. "After you, Ms. Lin." As Maya stepped over the threshold into the empty, silent restaurant, a thought, clear and terrifying, cut through her confusion. Mr. Henderson had just berated her, insulted her, and sent her home. He had told her she was a worthless cog in his machine, and now the man who had bought out the entire restaurant, the man who was waiting inside just for her, was the one person Henderson would move heaven and earth to impress. She had been fired from a job she desperately needed less than 10 minutes ago. Now, she was the guest of honor at an event that would likely cost more than she would make in a decade. The whiplash was staggering. As the heavy doors of Aria closed behind her, shutting out the gawking faces of her co-workers and the ashen face of her now former boss, she realized one thing with absolute certainty: her life as she knew it was over. What was about to replace it was a terrifying, exhilarating unknown. The silence inside Aria was unnerving. The restaurant, usually a symphony of clattering cutlery, hushed conversations, and ambient music, was as still and quiet as a cathedral. The lights were dimmed to the intimate golden glow of the previous evening. Every table was set to perfection, a legion of crystal glasses and polished silver, standing sentinel in the gloom. It was a ghost of a dinner service waiting for guests who would never arrive. In the center of the vast empty room, standing by the very table where he had sat last night, was Julian Croft. He was dressed more casually today, in dark trousers and a soft cashmere sweater the color of charcoal. The absence of the severe suit made him look younger, but also more vulnerable. The immense weight of his sorrow was still there, but now, without the armor of his corporate uniform, it was closer to the surface. He turned as Maya entered, and his eyes, deep and searching, met hers. "Ms. Lin." "Maya." "Thank you for coming back," he said. His voice was the same low, raspy tone from last night, but it was steadier, clearer. I was told you wanted to see me." Maya managed her hands, clutching the strap of her bag like a lifeline. She felt impossibly small and out of place, her worn coat and scuffed boots a stark contrast to the opulent surroundings. Evelyn, the assistant, gave her a small, reassuring nod before melting away into the shadows, leaving them alone. "I did," Julian said. He gestured to the empty chair opposite him, the one he had stared at for an hour. "Please. Sit." Hesitantly, Maya slipped into the chair. It was still surreal, sitting as a guest at a table she had wiped down 1,000 times. Julian remained standing, his hands resting on the back of his own chair. He looked at the table, at the single unlit candle between them, and a faint, sad smile touched his lips. "This table," he began, his voice softening with memory. "This is where I asked my wife to marry me. Her name was Elara. We were students then, with barely 2 dimes to rub together. We split a single dessert, a crème brûlée. It was the most expensive thing we'd eaten all year. She laughed so hard when I proposed that she snorted, and then she cried, and then she said, yes. Right here. He paused, lost in the moment. Maya sat perfectly still, her own anxieties dissolving in the face of his palpable, heart-breaking nostalgia. She wasn't a waitress anymore. She was a witness. Yesterday, he continued, finally meeting her eyes again, was the 2nd anniversary of her death. She was a painter, an artist, fiercely talented more than anyone ever knew. She saw the world differently. She saw the truth in things, the color in shadows, the light in people's eyes. She used to say that most people look, but very few people see. He let that hang in the air for a moment. I've spent the last 2 years surrounded by people. Board members, lawyers, investors, staff. They all look at me, but they see axiom dynamics. They see a number in a bank account. They see a name on a list. They offer condolences that sound like they've been written by a public relations team. They are loud, and they are empty. He finally moved, pulling his chair out and sitting down opposite her. He leaned forward, his expression intent. Then I came here last night. I don't know why. A foolish pilgrimage, maybe. I was sitting here drowning. And then you came over. You didn't ask me what I wanted to order. You didn't rush me. You didn't see a difficult customer or a wealthy mark. He gestured to the space between them. You brought me a glass of water. And you said, sometimes you don't know you're thirsty until someone offers you a drink. Elara used to say things like that. Maya felt a tremor go through her. I'm sorry for your loss. I didn't mean to intrude. You didn't intrude, he said, his voice firm. For the first time in 2 years, someone saw that I was thirsty. Not for water. You saw a human being in pain, and you offered a moment of quiet grace. You didn't want anything in return. It was the most honest human thing that has happened to me since she died. He leaned back, the intensity in his eyes, softening into something that looked like resolve. I left last night and couldn't stop thinking about it, about how one small, genuine act could cut through 2 years of noise. I had my team find out who you were. Evelyn is thorough. I learned you're a waitress, that you're struggling to make ends meet. And I learned that you're an artist. Maya's breath hitched. How? Evelyn found a blog you used to keep. Brush strokes in the margin. You haven't updated it in over a year, but your work is on there. Your sketches, your paintings of the city, humiliation and a strange, fierce pride warred within her. Her art was the most private part of her. The thought of this powerful, grieving man looking through her amateurish blog was mortifying. They're not very good, she mumbled, looking down at her hands. They're honest, he corrected her gently. They're full of life. They're exactly what Elara's early work looked like. Full of raw, untaught potential. Full of a need to see the world and capture it. He fell silent, and in that silence, Maya felt the true purpose of this meeting begin to coalesce. This wasn't just a thank you. It was something more. Before she died, Julian said, his voice thick with emotion. Elara and I planned to start a foundation, a way to support emerging artists who had the talent but not the means. Artists like her, when we were young. Artists like you. After she passed, I couldn't bring myself to do it. It was too painful. It felt like an ending, a memorial to what was lost. He looked directly at her, and for the first time she saw a flicker of light in his eyes, a spark of purpose returning to a man who had been hollowed out by grief. Your gesture last night made me realize I was wrong. The Alara Croft Foundation shouldn't be a memorial. It should be a beginning. It should be a living thing, and I want you to be its first recipient. The words hit Maya with the force of a physical blow. She couldn't process them. Recipient Foundation. It sounded like a language from another planet. I don't understand, she whispered. I want to offer you a full scholarship to the Massachusetts College of Art and Design, starting this fall. I want to provide you with a dedicated studio space in the South End, fully stocked with any materials you could ever need. And I want to provide you with a living stipend that will cover your rent, your sister's medical bills, and all your expenses, so that you can dedicate every single moment of your time not to serving tables, but to creating art. So you can paint. Maya stared at him, her mind a complete blank. It was too much. The scale of it was incomprehensible. It was a fantasy, a fever dream brought on by stress and lack of sleep. Why she finally asked the single word cutting through her shock. Why me? Because you see people, Maya Julian said simply, and because you reminded me that I needed to start seeing them again, too. This isn't charity. Consider it a commission. I am commissioning you to be the artist you were meant to be. I am investing in your potential. The only thing I ask in return is that you don't waste it, that you create, that you work, and that someday you use your success to offer a glass of water to someone else who needs it. Tears began to well in Maya's eyes, hot and unstoppable. They weren't tears of sadness or even just happiness. They were tears of pure, overwhelming release. The dam of years of struggle, of silent worry, of deferred dreams had just been obliterated. Outside the restaurant, Mr. Henderson was likely still trying to figure out how to salvage his career. Her co-workers were probably exchanging wild theories over text messages. But inside the silent, cavernous dining room, Maya Lin, the cog in the machine, wept as a quiet, grieving billionaire offered her not just money, but the one thing she had never allowed herself to have a future. The offer hung in the air, vast and shimmering, like a galaxy of impossible stars. Maya's first instinct was disbelief, a deep-seated defense mechanism honed by years of disappointment. People like her didn't get handed their dreams on a silver platter, not even in a place like Aria. There was always a catch, a hidden clause, a price too high to pay. I can't accept this, she stammered, wiping at her tears with the back of her hand. The words felt foolish as soon as they left her mouth, but they were born of a lifetime of pragmatic pessimism. It's too much. I'm nobody. Julian Croft's expression didn't falter. He seemed to have anticipated this reaction. Nobody, he repeated softly. You're the person who walked across a room to show kindness to a stranger. That's not nobody. As for the rest, Elara came from nothing. Her father was a mechanic, her mother a seamstress. She believed that talent was universal, but opportunity was not. The entire purpose of this foundation is to correct that imbalance. This isn't a gift I am giving you. It's a debt I am paying to her memory. He leaned forward again. I understand your hesitation. This is unconventional. So let's remove the grandeur from it. I am not a billionaire benefactor in this room. I am just a man who wants to see good art in the world. And you are an artist. Before I sign a single check or enroll you in a single class, I want you to show me your work. Not the blog, your real work. The pieces you have hidden in your apartment. I want you to let me see your art. And more importantly, I want you to defend it. Tell me why you paint. Tell me what you're trying to say. This was the catch. It wasn't a contract with hidden fees. It was a test of her soul. He wasn't just offering her a future. He was asking her to prove she was worthy of it, not to him, but to herself. The thought was terrifying. Her apartment was her sacred, messy, private space. Her art was a raw, exposed nerve. Showing it to anyone, let alone Julian Croft, felt like voluntary vivisection. "Okay," she whispered, her voice trembling, but firm. A resolve was hardening within her. If this was the price of admission, she would pay it. She had to. For Lily. For herself. "Okay. We can go now." Julian nodded, a flicker of respect in his eyes. He made a quiet call to Evelyn. "We're leaving. Have a car ready." The ride to her Alston apartment was a surreal journey through two different worlds. The plush leather and silent engine of the Lincoln Continental were a world away from the rattling, graffiti-scarred bus she normally took. When they pulled up outside her worn-out brick building with its rusting fire escapes, Maya felt a fresh wave of insecurity. "It's not much," she said apologetically, as she led him up the 3 flights of creaking stairs. "The first studio Elara and I shared was a converted janitor's closet," Julian replied without a hint of judgment. "Space doesn't make the art, Maya. The artist does." The moment she opened the door to her apartment, she saw it through his eyes. The small, cramped living room, the second-hand furniture, the pile of bills on the counter. And then there was her corner. It was a beautiful, chaotic mess of canvases stacked against the wall, coffee cans filled with brushes, and dozens of sketches pinned to a corkboard. The smell of oil paint and turpentine was thick and immediate. For a moment, she wanted to apologize for the mess, for the raw, unfinished state of it all. But then she remembered his challenge: defend it. She took a deep breath. This is it. Julian walked into the space slowly, his hands clasped behind his back. He didn't speak. He simply looked. His eyes roamed over the pinned sketches. Quick charcoal studies of commuters on the train, their faces weary or lost in thought. The gnarled hands of an old man reading a newspaper. A detailed drawing of Lily, captured in a rare moment of peaceful, untroubled sleep. Then he turned to the canvases. Many were unfinished explorations of color and shadow, but a few were complete. There was a cityscape of Boston at dusk, the lights of the Prudential Tower reflecting like scattered jewels in the Charles River. But the mood was melancholic, lonely. There was another, a self-portrait, but she had painted over her own face with a frantic swirl of grey and blue, the colors of anxiety. Finally, his gaze settled on the largest, most complete canvas. It was a portrait of her sister Lily. She was sitting by the window, bathed in a pale, fragile light, holding her inhaler. But Maya hadn't painted the sickness. She had painted the fierce, defiant light in Lily's eyes, the stubborn set of her jaw. She had painted her sister's spirit, a brilliant flame in a fragile vessel. The background was dark and threatening, but the light around Lily seemed to push it back. The painting was called Breathe. Julian stood before it for a long time, his face unreadable. Maya's heart pounded in her chest. She had poured every ounce of her love, fear, and hope for her sister into that canvas. It was the truest thing she had ever created. "Tell me about this one," he finally said, his voice quiet. "That's Lily," Maya said. "My sister. She has severe, brittle asthma. Her whole life has been a fight to do something as simple as breathe. I wanted to paint her strength, not her illness. Everyone sees the frail girl with the inhaler. I see a warrior. I wanted to make other people see the warrior." He nodded slowly, still looking at the painting. "You have. You absolutely have." He turned to face her, and his expression was one of absolute certainty. "The offer stands, Maya. Unconditionally. Your voice is too important not to be heard." A sob of relief escaped her. It was real. This was all real. And then they were interrupted. A loud, frantic knocking echoed from the apartment door. "Maya. Maya, are you in there? It's me, Henderson. Please, I need to talk to you." Maya froze, her blood turning to ice. Julian's face hardened. The soft-spoken art patron instantly replaced by the formidable CEO. "Do not answer that," he said in a low, commanding tone. But Henderson was persistent. "Maya, please, there's been a terrible mistake. I know he's in there with you." "Mr. Croft, sir. Please, I can explain everything. She's a wonderful employee, a protégé. I was grooming her for management." The desperation and the absurdity of the lie were sickening. Maya looked at Julian, horrified. "He fired me," she whispered, as if Julian didn't already know. "He called me a cog and told me to go home." Julian's jaw tightened. He walked to the door. Maya thought he was going to open it, but instead, he pressed a button on his phone. "Evelyn, the former manager of Aria, is currently harassing Ms. Lin at her private residence. Please have building security remove him, and make a call to the restaurant's ownership group. Let them know that their general manager's behavior has cost them any future business from me or my company, and that I'll be making my displeasure known to my corporate partners who frequent their establishment. I'm sure they'll handle his employment status accordingly." He ended the call. Outside, Henderson's pleas continued growing more pathetic. "Maya, I have a family, a mortgage. Please." They stood in silence, listening to the man's career immolate on the other side of the door. A few moments later they heard other voices, and Henderson's protests finally faded as he was escorted away. The silence that returned was profound. Maya looked at Julian, stunned by the swift, ruthless efficiency of his power. He had just dismantled a man's life with a single phone call. He saw the look on her face. "That wasn't a display of power, Maya," he said, his voice losing its hard edge. "It was a consequence. He didn't get fired because he insulted me. He got fired because he tried to crush someone's spirit for his own ego, and because he valued cruelty over compassion. The world has enough of that. Elara believed in creating spaces where that kind of behavior had no power." He looked around her small, paint-scented apartment. "And that's what this foundation will be. A space for artists to create free from the Hendersons of the world. Free to simply breathe." He smiled, a genuine, warm smile that reached his eyes for the first time. "So Maya Lin, are you ready to get to work?" Looking at her painting of Lily at the warrior in the fragile light. Maya felt all her fear and doubt finally wash away, replaced by a fierce, soaring hope. She was being given a choice that was no choice at all. It was a doorway. Yes, she said, her voice clear and strong. Yes, I am. The 6 months that followed were not merely a change, but a complete transmutation. Maya's life, once a cramped and brittle thing, was systematically deconstructed and reassembled into a sprawling, vibrant tapestry she had only dared to imagine. The constant grinding anxiety that had been her lifelong companion was replaced by a disorienting sense of peace so unfamiliar, it was almost alarming. For the first few weeks, she would wake up with her heart pounding, the phantom sensation of overdue bills and empty cupboards gripping her before the soft light of her new reality filtered in and calmed the storm. The first most tangible change was the studio. It wasn't just a room. It was a sanctuary, a cathedral of light and possibility. A sprawling loft in the south end, it had floors of weathered hardwood that seemed to hold the echoes of 100 other creative souls. The first time Evelyn unlocked the door and gestured her inside, Maya stood frozen on the threshold. Massive north-facing windows drank in the steady, indirect Boston light, illuminating millions of dancing dust motes. The air smelled of fresh gesso linseed oil and raw canvas, a perfume of pure potential. Julian had been meticulous. An entire wall was a library of paint tubes of Old Holland and Williamsburg oils arranged in a perfect chromatic scale. Another held an arsenal of brushes, soft sable for details, stiff hog bristle for texture, standing at attention in their holders. There was no longer a choice between a tube of cobalt blue and a carton of milk. Here, there was only the overwhelming freedom to create. For the first 2 days, she did nothing but walk the space, running her hands over the rough canvas, uncapping tubes of paint, just to breathe in their earthy scent. It was the paralyzing, terrifying freedom of a blank page. The second change was her home, and by extension, Lily's world. Evelyn, with a quiet efficiency that could probably broker world peace, had found them a bright, clean, 2-bedroom apartment in Brookline. It was a place of impossible luxuries, an elevator that worked hallways that smelled of lemon polish, and proximity to one of the best pulmonary centers in the country. The day they moved, Lily, untethered from the confines of their old, cramped life, ran from room to room, her joyous laughter echoing off the bare walls. She claimed her own bedroom, painting it a soft, calming lavender. That night, Maya sat on the floor of the new living room, amidst a sea of boxes, watching her sister sleep. Lily's breath was even and quiet, a steady rhythm, aided by the new top-of-the-line nebulizer that had arrived that afternoon, an anonymous gift from the Foundation. The crushing weight of fear for her sister's health, a burden Maya had carried so long it felt like part of her spine had finally blessedly lifted. The most profound change, however, was the one that happened inside her. Enrolling at Mass Art was like learning to breathe a new kind of air. She was no longer an outsider peering in, but a participant in a vibrant, chaotic conversation. She was surrounded by people who spoke her esoteric language, who would argue passionately about the subtle warmth of a raw umber underpainting or the emotional impact of a single diagonal line. A notoriously difficult professor named Dr. Anya Sharma singled her out early on. Sharma saw Maya's raw, intuitive talent, but also her technical weaknesses. She dismantled Maya's self-taught methods with brutal honesty, forcing her to learn the tedious but essential grammar of her craft perspective anatomy color theory. "Instinct is a gift, Ms. Lin," Dr. Sharma had said, tapping a charcoal sketch where the perspective was slightly off. "But instinct without discipline is just a happy accident. I'm not interested in accidents." The criticism stung, but Maya, for the first time, was hungry for it. She was becoming a master of her craft, not just its servant. Julian Croft remained a quiet, steady presence. He was not a patron demanding a product, but a mentor nurturing a soul. His monthly visits to her studio became anchors in her new life. He would walk through the space looking at her works in progress, his hands clasped behind his back. "What are you afraid of in this piece?" he asked once, gesturing to a half-finished portrait of a tired cook she'd known from a diner. "You've captured his weariness, but you haven't found his pride. What truth are you avoiding?" He spoke of Ilara constantly, not with maudlin grief, but with a vibrant reverence. He shared how Ilara had once destroyed an entire series of paintings a week before a show, because she felt they were technically perfect, but emotionally dishonest. Through these stories, Ilara became a posthumous mentor to Maya, a guiding star of artistic integrity. One crisp autumn afternoon, as Maya was wrestling with the cook's portrait, trying to find the glint of pride in his eyes, Julian arrived with a proposal. "The foundation is hosting its first official fundraising gala in the spring," he announced, his tone casual, but his eyes intent. "We'll be auctioning off pieces from some established names, a Diebenkorn study, a small Richter. The funds will support the next round of scholarships. I want the centerpiece of the evening, the main featured work, to be yours." Maya's brush froze, hovering over the canvas. "Mine!" The word came out as a squeak. "Julian, I can't. I'm not ready. I'm still a student. These are masters." "You're an artist," he corrected her firmly, his gaze unwavering. "And you are the living, breathing embodiment of this foundation's purpose. It's not about being ready, it's about being true. It's time for people to see what you do." The challenge was a spark thrown into a reservoir of gasoline. For the next 3 months, the studio became her entire world. She abandoned the service worker series, knowing she needed to create something more personal, more fundamental. She stretched a massive canvas so large it dominated the loft. This would be her testament. The genesis of The Quiet Stranger was a painful, exhilarating battle. There were days of frustration where the paint felt like mud and her vision was clouded. There were nights she'd sit on the floor staring at the canvas, convinced she was a fraud. Lily would often sit quietly in a corner of the studio, reading her calm presence, a silent encouragement. "You've got the sad man, right?" Lily said one evening, looking at the dark, sorrowful figure taking shape. "But you haven't found the light yet." Her sister's simple wisdom cut through the noise in Maya's head. The light wasn't just about technique. It was about hope. She found it in the memory of Ilara, a woman she'd never met but knew intimately, and poured it all onto the canvas. The night of the gala was a symphony of surrealism. It was held in a stunning contemporary art gallery, a world of stark white walls, soaring ceilings, and the low hum of money and influence. Maya, in a simple, elegant dark blue dress Evelyn had insisted on, felt a terrifying echo of her old self, the invisible waitress observing a world she could never enter. But then she caught a glimpse of Lily across the room, looking radiant and healthy, confidently chatting with Dr. Sharma, and the ghost of the waitress receded. This was her world now. She had earned her place here. Julian's speech was brief and powerful, a quiet tribute to Ilara's vision of art as a conduit for empathy. Then he said her name, and a spotlight found her. As she walked to the podium, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs, she saw 2 attendants pull the velvet cloth from her painting. The work, titled The Quiet Stranger, commanded the room into silence. It was an allegory, a myth born from a moment of truth. On one side, a man rendered in deep, sorrowful blues and greys, a figure of profound grief, his face lost to shadow. On the other, bathed in a warm, impossibly golden light, sat a woman with fierce, hopeful eyes, Ilara. She was leaning forward across the table, her expression one of focused empathy, offering the man a single gleaming glass of water. The light from her and the glass was an active force, a tangible thing, pushing back the oppressive shadows that threatened to consume him. A collective hush fell. Maya saw Julian staring at it, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. He was not looking at the shadow of himself, but at the incandescent image of his wife, her spirit made manifest by Maya's brush. Maya's speech was not long. She simply told her story, her voice gaining strength as she spoke. She told them about being a waitress, about her sister's fight to breathe, about the dream she had kept hidden. She told them about the night a quiet, well-dressed stranger had sat at her table and how she had offered him a glass of water. This foundation, she finished, her voice thick with emotion, but unwavering, isn't just about funding art. It's about funding the moments of human connection that inspire it. It proves that the smallest gesture of grace can change a life. It changed mine, and the painting before you is my thank you. The silence that followed was profound, a shared, held breath. Then it broke in a wave of thunderous applause. Later during the auction, a tense bidding war erupted between a private collector and a representative from the Museum of Fine Arts. When the gavel finally fell, the quiet stranger had been acquired by the museum for a sum that made Maya feel light-headed every dollar, flowing directly back into the Ilara Croft Foundation. Late in the evening, as the crowd thinned, Maya stood with Julian before her painting, now marked with a small plaque indicating its acquisition. "She would have loved it," he said, his voice husky with emotion. "And she would have loved you." "Thank you, Julian," Maya said, her heart a resonant, humming thing. "For everything. For seeing me." He shook his head, a small, genuine smile finally reaching his eyes as he looked at the radiant portrait of his wife. "Thank you, Maya, for helping me see her again." They stood in comfortable silence, two people from impossibly different poles of existence, forever bound by a shared understanding of loss art and the transformative power of a simple glass of water. Maya looked from the painting to her own reflection in the gallery's large window. The weary, anxious waitress was gone for good. In her place stood an artist, her gaze steady and clear. Her voice found her journey just beginning. Maya's story is a powerful reminder that we have no idea the impact we can have on the people we meet. The stranger you pass on the street, the server who takes your order, the person sitting alone in a cafe. Everyone is carrying a story we can't see. A simple moment of genuine kindness, of seeing someone not for their job or their appearance, but for their humanity, can be the lifeline they desperately need. It can change their day, or like in Maya's case, it can change a life forever. If this story moved you, please give this video a like and share it with others. Let's spread the message that compassion is a currency that costs nothing to give, but is priceless to receive. And don't forget to subscribe and click the notification bell for more real-life stories that inspire and remind us of the incredible power we all hold to make a difference. What small act of kindness will you perform today?